So last but certainly not least, Kirill Sheynkman.
I just get to sit. Like you said, I don't have to do slides, so I'm privileged. Unusual for me.
So welcome, great to have you. So we, at the beginning of this session, I was talking about smart money and the opportunity for New York to build a big data community based in part on the fact that there are investors in New York that really understand this ecosystem. And so I mentioned IA Ventures. I think there's a number of other firms. I know that RRE is looking at a lot more data deals these days. But so you're the sort of the new kid on the block. Do you want to maybe start by telling us about yourself, and then we'll get into RTP?
Sure. I hope this is not going to be just about RTP. It's going to be about actually the topic here, which is big data here. I was mentioning to Matt earlier that usually on these panels, I'm the nerdliest, geekiest presenter because I'm fairly unusual for a VC in the sense that I still write code. And I've done 3 enterprise software startups where I wrote the first version of the product. I've always been an engineer, and I still consider myself an engineer. Maybe not a scientist, but certainly an engineer, and not a VC. And usually I'm on panels with VCs, and I have to act really engineering technically smart. Here I'm here to talk about money, which is a bit odd for me.
So we managed to out geek you?
You definitely. And it's actually companies that I know, companies that I have a lot of respect for, the previous presenters. I'm familiar with everything that they do, and it's great to be in such company for an investor, just a mere investor. RTP is a new fund. I've been most of my life on the entrepreneur's shoes and starting companies. I finally thought I was old enough to do venture capital because, as Guy Kawasaki wrote a few years ago, that VC should be your last job, not your first job. So I resigned to the fact that I think I'm ready for my last job.
Do you actually want to talk about the companies you set up, because you're being very modest, but this is...
well, my first company was actually very quick. We were kids, and we built a relational OLAP engine at the time that we had no idea what venture capital was until these guys from Sequoia came up and asked who was funding us, and we said, "What are you talking about?" And I had this guy named Mike Moritz on my board. He was investing in Yahoo. I was making fun of him, saying, "Advertising, come on, what is this?" So we were kids, and that company fairly quickly was acquired by Informix, and it became a part of their analytical data warehouse products, and now it's part of IBM after the big fish ate the little fish, and so on. I was in EIR at Sequoia, and then I started a company called Plumtree Software, which was a corporate portal play. Again, it was about data, and because my whole life was spent around data. Going back earlier, when I was graduating from school, I was interviewing with a head of college degree from Oracle, which was one of my first jobs. He said, "So what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to do databases." He said, "No, really?" I said, "No, I really want to do databases." He was kind of surprised. So Plumtree was yet another. It was a heterogeneous information system. That's what I called it. That was not a good marketing term, so we came up with corporate portal. And and that's I told you I was a geek, so that's what I did. Retired for a while and went back to San Francisco one more time. Did a company in cloud computing that unfortunately didn't work out. It was about infrastructure automation, and came back to New York to do this now.
Terrific. Okay, so RTP Ventures.
So RTP Ventures, new fund. It was we just started operating in September of last year, and I get to do another startup. And now the startup is a VC fund that's run by somebody like me. We've done 6 investments so far, 2 seed and 4 Series A. And in the data space, we invested in a company called GridGain, which is a real-time grid computing and cluster computing analytics platform. Kill the elephant is their motto, so they're very they're anti-Hadoop, and I think it's not so much anti-Hadoop. Hadoop, there's nothing wrong with Hadoop. It's built in a different generation with a different kind of data processing. That's their take on it. So that's one.
What do they? How are they going to do that?
It's a distributed processing grid that actually it's data and CPU localized to specifically units of work. It's pretty hairy stuff, but it's a system that has APIs in Scala and in Java, and they're working on JavaScript and Python, where you can take a function and basically the MapReduce becomes 3 lines of code that in real time goes out there of a grid of arbitrary size that you have set up, pulls in the right data, and aggregates the results and processes the information. Pretty interesting company. Thomson uses them, so here. Apple uses them to do supply chain analytics. Daiwo uses them to do. It's mostly financial companies that do portfolio and real-time portfolio pricing and portfolio analysis. Apple does supply chain modeling with their software, open source and enterprise edition.
Are they here in New York with a?
No, they're 2 Russians. I'm Russian, so there we go. That are in San Francisco.
I think you mentioned that today was Red Army Day, which is
today is Red Army Day, so yeah, it is, and as men we were supposed to get vodka and bullets as presents. And
that's later. That's the
networking part. No, they're in San Francisco, and their engineering team is St. Petersburg, actually my hometown, not Florida. But anyway, so that's one, and we just made an investment in a company called Drawn to Scale, which is actually with IA here in New York. They are a database layer on top of an existing Hadoop cluster that lets you do SQL access to real-time data as it's being updated to Hadoop. So if you think about a parallel clustered index that is getting updated at the same time a Hadoop instance is getting updated, and then there's a JDBC, ODBC driver that has certain mappings that lets you actually do analytics on the data as it comes in. The team is originally from AgeBase, so it's some hardcore guys in their early stage company. So we're doing that.
So just to make sure I understand, what business problem does it solve? Is that I'm probably getting this wrong.
I want to take Tableau and I want to hook it up to a Hadoop cluster. How do I do that?
Okay.
Right. I mean, one of the issues with Hadoop is that if you look at the demos of analytical tools hooking up to Hadoop, it's still ETL. Let's get the data out. Let's put it into some kind of a store. How do you actually do this in real time? And frankly, one of the issues I think with any new data technology, and we're talking about big data, is one of the benefits of relational databases, fortunately or unfortunately, is the ubiquity of a language that everyone knows and understands and knows how to use. That's why if you look at some of the database products that Mike Stonebreaker created in his life, there were always extensions of SQL, of the standard dialect, and he would add time series functionality to it, or he did geospatial, because actually there's a way of thinking and there's an infrastructure for doing data and queries. So with NoSQL databases, with Hadoop Pig and Hive and things like that, there's sort of a new language and a new paradigm of thinking about things. Now, not all analytics necessarily fit nicely into a SQL paradigm. How do you do a percent of total of a column, of a set of data in a column? They have to be extensions. So the problem that it's trying to solve is how do you actually apply familiar syntax to a new kind of storage technology.
Right. So it's addressing the issue that there's very few people that know how to do this and basically expand it, sort of democratize the access to Hadoop and other technologies, right?
But I'm not here to plug my companies. I know, but all VCs do that. They just talk about what they invest in. They're interesting investments, but I like the topic in general.
Any other interesting investment that you don't want to plug?
No, look, I don't want to, I think I don't have slides, but if I had slides, right, this is, I'm here to talk from an investor point of view, right, and I gave you my background as an engineer. The difference between science engineering and investing, that there's a dollar sign involved. Dollar sign is involved in all the equations that we look at, and I think the issue that a lot of the companies that are sort of blooming in the hype, I would say, of big data that's starting to happen. It's not really hyped, but it's getting there. Is I call hitting the so what wall. And right now we're talking about interesting things that you can see from charts and interesting patterns. And oh, isn't this neat? And isn't this great? Yeah, it is neat. Yes, it is interesting. Yes, it's kind of cool. But so what? Right? So what to the person who has the checkbook? What does this really mean for me? What does this really buy me? What does this really get me? Why do I care about the Kardashian tweets? But somebody in social world cares about the Kardashian tweets. It doesn't matter, right? So that's what you don't want to hit. There's an old saying, I don't know, but kind of the old diagram in the database world. The data does not equal information. Information doesn't equal knowledge. Knowledge doesn't equal wisdom. That's the chain in which data gets transferred. First, it's data itself, then it becomes information, eventually it becomes knowledge, and hopefully you can extract some wisdom from it. With the big data world, we're excited about the data part. We're starting to get some information out with visualization and alerting and monitoring, things like that. No one has yet gotten to knowledge. We assume that everyone is going to take these graphs and make some decisions and be able to conclude things about that. And we're not there yet, and this has to happen in order for value to be there, because ultimate value is in knowledge, which then can drive wisdom. And I think that we need to think about that. And a lot of the, one other thing that I would sort of be thinking about is, it's true that we wanted to, I like the fact that, Splunk keeps all of the data around, right? Because there's this issue of provenance, right, and traceability, and being able to understand how did you make this conclusion, right? We don't want our analytics to be black boxes. We want them to be boxes with a glass top that I can look and see how things happen, open it up, reach in, and figure out what went on in there. So, I think that overall it's an exciting landscape as an investor. Obviously, I love this stuff, and this is what I've done all my life. I've, in some way, shape, or form, I've done databases, but let's be careful and not get too excited about data for data's sake, technology for technology's sake, neat stuff. I love Edward Tufte. I love his graphs, but his graphs are done that way for a reason, so you can look at it and make a decision very quickly. Look at a vast amount of information and actually do an analysis, see something. And that's what we need to be driving towards.
Very interesting. So, there are a number of people here who are budding entrepreneurs thinking about ideas of businesses to start and ways to leave their job and live the startup dream. In the big data world, where do you see the opportunity? So you mentioned, and I guess sort of echoes what I was saying at the beginning.
Hadoop is more than a decade old, right? It's 15 years old, something like that. And I think that it's popular. It's hot right now. There's and there are O'Reilly books and there are Manning books on it. It has arrived. It's cool. There are conferences. I think that it has its drawbacks, and I think that without necessarily attacking the Hadoop ecosystem, I think there's a lot of activity and improvement that can happen around some of the ideas that Hadoop has, right, of the distributed file system, distributed processing, of MapReduce as in decomposing operations and composing them again. I think that's an interesting opportunity. Machine to machine, we talked about that here as well. The idea that you still have people sitting there and looking at these dashboards, right? Yeah, it's never going to go away. And people look at Bloomberg terminals. I know I did when I was retired. I had a Bloomberg terminal on my desk, and it was fun. And I looked at things, and yes, but really a lot of the trading that goes on is actually done by machines receiving feeds from other machines. And I think the same is going to be true with systems. That systems that understand signals, that can react. The same thing is true with the social media, right? That and it's not just dumb automation. Oh, if someone utters an obscenity about us, utter an obscenity back at them. That's a pretty easy thing to write. But let's be clever about it. Let's insult them correctly. It's that kind of that kind of. But anyway, it's intelligent machines who can actually react at a pace in which these real-time data streams are coming in, because people can't. You can't have enough people doing that. We're already seeing the notion of streams as opposed to data stores. All the companies here that we're talking about, they were talking about streaming data, right? And it's a different operating language in terms of how you transform streams of information as opposed to how you extract data from stores. And we don't have a language yet for transforming streaming data and operating on it in real time. And there's science to be done, there are things to be written, and that's why we have academics, and that's why we have actually, SQL was a language that IBM endorsed and came out, I think, AT&T originally, and as everything else did. But so there's not a formalism around how streams of data are done, and if there is a formalism, it benefits the whole ecosystem in terms of what we can do in real time and what we can do this. Information display, right? There are. Again, I'm an Edward Tufte fan, and if you look at some of the visualizations, some of the graphics, I like Tableau as a company. It's in Seattle. Unfortunately, they're Windows only. But anyway, the neat things that how you visualize things and how you do things, I think we're just scratching the surface. And then again, I'm the geek that always liked semantic web, and I know semantic web has kind of gone off the deep end for a while. But the notion of graph databases and RDF data stores and inference engines that run on top of that, I still, deep in my heart, somehow cling to a hope that the triples are so elegant. They can do so many things with them, right? And I just hope that somebody actually pragmatically does something with it, because I'd love to, without all the scientific dogma of OWL 2 versus OWL 1 and all, without any of that, just I really hope that is a technology. The notion of inference engines, the notion of me and you looking at the same set of information, concluding completely different things, using that as basis for other conclusions, and understanding why we concluded it, and being able to modify that, and share the logic and the reasoning behind how we analyze things. That's the seed bet that you dream about and you hope for. So I think there's still lots of things. Just it's not VCs go up on stage and talk about, we think social, local, and mobile and deals are exciting. Yeah, there's still a lot of exciting technology out there. There's still a lot of problems that need to be solved, and there are companies that will solve it and will make a lot of money doing it. And that's my bet and my hope.
That's very interesting. And everything that you describe is, as you said, very much technology based. The world of big data, though, goes further than just pure technology, pure infrastructure, or even analytics, even visualization. You did mention any companies trying to build businesses outside of technology. Is that because you are naturally just interested in engineering stuff, or because you think there are no opportunities?
No. It's not just because I'm disinterested. Is you start with the infrastructure layers, and you start at the bottom, and you gradually move up in terms of things. Right now, we're still on data and information and those kinds of things, right? If you look at information companies and companies who use big data, they've existed, right? Just the notion of what big data was, and Walmart, I spent a lot of time in the data warehousing world, but everyone looked at Walmart as this incredible company because they generated terabytes of data a day. Terabytes. Well, that was back then. There was a company called Teradata, right, that had tera data. That's a lot. And now you have it in your iMac, I have 1.5 terabyte, certainly, disk drive. So, what's the competitive advantage of Amazon, right? Yeah, awesome, great company, great service. It's supply chain and how they understand exactly how to ship things and what things take, and that's So those are the users of big data. It's those kinds of companies that build efficient businesses. Federal Express, everyone always talked about how Federal Express knows exactly how to route things, and they have algorithms and there's science behind this. So those are the companies that get built using these technologies, right? And they're as good of investments as anything else. And it just indicates that the company is smart about how they're going to analyze and quantify what they do so they can improve it. right? That's the big thing. What I don't necessarily like is that, you know, the monetizing data is kind of the new black, and iconographics is the raison d'etre, and this is it. The people used to say, well, we're going to make money with advertising, and kind of people understood that mathematically you really have to be kind of special to make money with advertising. So now we're going to generate a lot of data, and that's supposed to be a revenue model, and that's supposed to be, for us VCs, going, oh yeah, they're going to have lots of data, then let's give them money. Not really. So what are you going to do with it? Who's going to want the data that you have? Right, so that's a disturbing thing, and I encourage companies that get started that are not in the infrastructure space that says we're going to generate data, we're going to use data. Well, how are you going to do this? What are you going to do with it? How are you really going to take competitive advantage out of it? Yes, big data, yeah, good, but just having it and hoping to sell it, unlikely.
Yeah, I would actually very much concur with that. I think that the business of selling data is a very difficult business. And from a Bloomberg perspective, we speak very often to startups that come to us with a hope to sell their data, raw data, and I think they quite frequently come out of those conversations fairly disappointed. Not that we don't want to buy the data, in some cases we do, but the monetary amount is not what they had in their projections typically. Whether that will evolve, I don't know. But anyway, questions from the audience? Yep.
The example you gave, Federal Express, for instance, how do you, like, one of the issues I see is like a lot of data that could be interesting or could be useful out there is locked up in different ways. So Federal Express probably doesn't make public all of the data that they have about their shipments. So how do you see companies deciding whether they're actually protecting anything by hiding it, or can they sell it or can they give it away? More companies should be giving away things that aren't of any value to them, but could be of value to others. So how do we get more data sets other than social?
How do we get more data sets? There's certain things that are very proprietary, and they should be proprietary, right? And I think that some of the data that Federal Express and Amazon and Walmart have, that's their competitive advantage, and why would they ever want to publicize it? It's not because they're being greedy, that's it. In terms of publicly sharing information, there are initiatives, and there are sites, and there are ways that share publicly available data set, but you can't tell an organization to share information. Look, Bloomberg has a lot of data, but I remember what I was paying every month for having that really fast, cool live feed, right? And it was the best platform out there for it, so I paid it. And that's not in the public domain, because that's how the companies make money. It's there's my stuff, and then there's not. Right?
So you spoke about how needing to transform data into knowledge, into information, knowledge, et cetera. But I find that a lot of businesses, a lot of executives on the sort of non-technical side are very reluctant to give up being the step to turn information into knowledge. And when, so in my own limited work experience, just offering to provide that step, instead of showing you a graph, the computer can do the analysis. They say, no, I really want to look at the graph. How do we just wait until that person goes away? Or?
Well, but I mean,
it's taken out by the machine.
Well, first of all, people are aging, and generation. No, but generations do change. Actually, I know that's not the answer to your question, but just as a side note, that I'm in my mid-40s, and my perspective on things is very different than people who were in their mid-40s 20 years ago, in terms of technology, in terms of what you can actually automate. I don't think you're removing the human being, right? It's the same way that there's an autopilot on airplanes, but it doesn't remove the need for the pilot. And if you look at information, right, and and turning it into knowledge, people talked about data mining and discovery and those kinds of things, right? And one thing is I can look at a chart and I can say, oh, this looks strange, and compared to last month, this is a little bit odd. And one thing is having a system actually flag anomalies for you and look at things and look at patterns and look at unusual things and saying, I think that this is happening because it's raining, because I know that it's raining and you're getting this lawn product sold more this week in this particular zip code because of the weather. And it's still ultimately as the decision maker needs to accept that information, but a lot of the steps can be done for you.
All right, one more.
So the public markets over the last couple of years have been tumultuous, to say the least. How has the slowdown in the IPOs and the overall public market situation changed the way you approach VC investments?
I saw a chart, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, where it talked about the IPO market and said it's still, I forgot the term, what the term was, but it's kind of slow and dribbling and so on and so forth. And it had, speaking of misleading, since we're surrounded by people who are into charts, misleading charts, it started in 1999, right? So it had 99 number of IPOs, 2000 number of IPOs, 2001, and then dramatic drop, right? Then a drop again, and then rise back up to the previous level. Well, okay, so the anomaly were those years, not these years, right? That's the difference, first of all. So I think in terms of companies going public on the way that they were during the internet bubble, that's the anomaly, right? Two is there are companies that have a lot of cash to do acquisitions right now because, frankly, they've been sitting on a lot of cash. So acquisitions are actually attractive. There are regulatory environments that make the IPO process a little bit more challenging. So there are all these reasons to do this, but that doesn't mean that VCs don't have returns that don't have exits. There are, success factors is a nice return for the investors, right? Taleo went public. That's comparable, and I'm not sure in which case it was a better investment. The public Taleo that got acquired last week, right? Or Success Factors. Success Factors was public, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, what was the company that got the private one, the big acquisition last week?
In what space?
It's in Oracle, yeah. No, anyway. I'm sorry. I'm an early stage investor, so I don't look at those. But people look at Boston, right? And New York has this thing against Boston. If you look at Boston, you look at Vertica, you look at Unica, you look at Indica, they all end at A, but those are all nice exits for investors. They're happening, right? So I don't see venture capital as being, right? As with everything else, venture capital was overfunded during the bubble. Right? Venture capital's life cycle, right, the lifespan of a fund is about 10 years. Well, guess what? It's 2012, and the funds that are coming up to the end of their life were started right around 2001, 2002, when you can say, we're going to invest in the next, shoes online, and it's going to be great. And in case of Zappos, it was. And in case of pets and pet supplies, it wasn't.
And shoe dazzle, Kim Kardashian.
That's right. Well, unless you're Kim Kardashian, then you can
you can
socially steer your marketing strategy, and it'll be cool. Yeah.
Wonderful. So we're really running out of time, and I want you guys to have a chance to really talk to one another. So Kirill and everybody else is going to be at the reception area. So thank you.